Welcome to the National Early Years Children First programme. This is the Always Children First Early Years specific presentation. This programme has been developed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and concerns that some children may have been at additional risk during the extended period of lockdown. In this session, we will look at how we recognise and understand child protection and welfare concerns, our legal obligations, and how we follow organisational policies and procedures to report child protection and welfare concerns. There is also signposting to support documents and resources. The purpose of this presentation is to refresh information for early learning and care practitioners on Children First and their role and responsibilities in relation to identifying and reporting child protection and welfare concerns using appropriate procedures within their own organisation and TUSLA. This programme should be preceded by completing the TUSLA e-learning programme. It is suggested that practitioners complete the e-learning programme every 3 years. This session is designed as a revision of existing information and should not replace completion of the e-learning programme and attendance at the Always Children First foundation level programme. This session is suitable for all members of staff in early learning and care settings. This grid outlines the National Early Years Children First programme's training strategy. There are 3 tiers within this strategy. The first tier is the TUSLA e-learning programme, which will be discussed in the next slide. The second tier is the Early Learning and Care sector-specific Always Children First foundation level programme. This programme is delivered by trainers based in City and County Childcare Committees, Childminding Ireland and CNNG. The third tier is the Early Learning and Care sector-specific DLP training programme, which is currently in development. The National Early Years Children First Committee and TUSLA have amended the foundation level programme and the DLP programme to ensure that they are relevant to and in line with current best practice in the early learning and care sector. As mentioned, the first tier of the training programme is completion of the TUSLA e-learning programme. Completion of this online course is a prerequisite to attending the Always Children First foundation level training. The e-learning is designed to support people of all backgrounds and experience in recognising concerns about children and reporting such concerns if they arise. The programme is based on Children First National Guidance for the Protection of Welfare of Children and the Children First Act 2015. The programme takes approximately 1.5 hours to complete, but it can be done in a number of sittings. The programme will allow you to log back in and resume where you left off. It covers topics including recognising and reporting child abuse, the role of mandated persons, the responsibilities of organisations working with children to safeguard children, and the role of designated liaison persons. It is recommended that practitioners complete this course every 3 years. The Always Children First programme is based around early learning and care services using a child-centred approach to safeguarding children. We do this by working in a way that puts the best interests of the child at the core of how we work, providing a child-friendly environment, consulting and listening to children about the activities, services and programmes that they'll be involved in, seeking the child's feedback or evaluation of services, implementing child-friendly policies, and considering the impact of an adult's behaviour on the child. This list outlines some of the ways early learning and care services embrace child-centred practice. Further information can be found in the many pieces of early learning and care policy available, including the Astroshield Practice Guide, the First 5 Strategy, and the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Programme. The first section of this session will provide a refresher on recognising abuse and dealing with disclosures from children. Child abuse can be categorised into 4 different types: neglect, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. A child may be subjected to one or more forms of abuse at any given time. Abuse and neglect can occur within the family, in the community, or in an institutional setting. The abuser may be someone known to the child or a stranger, and it can be an adult or another child. In a situation where abuse is alleged to have been carried out by another child, you should consider it a child welfare and protection issue for both children, and you should follow child protection procedures for both the victim and the alleged abuser. The important factor in deciding whether the behaviour is abuse or neglect is the impact of that behaviour on the child rather than the intention of the parent or carer. The definition of neglect and abuse presented in this section are not legal definitions. They are intended to describe ways in which a child might experience abuse and how this abuse may be recognised. Neglect. Neglect occurs when a child does not receive adequate care or supervision to the extent that the child is harmed physically or developmentally. It is generally defined in terms of an omission of care where the child's health, development or welfare is impaired by being deprived of food, clothing, warmth, hygiene, medical care, intellectual stimulation or supervision and safety. A reasonable concern for the child's welfare would exist when neglect becomes typical of the relationship between the child and the parent or carer. This may become apparent where you see the child over a period of time, or the effects of neglect may be obvious based on having seen the child once. Child neglect is the most frequently reported category of abuse, both in Ireland and internationally. Ongoing chronic neglect is recognised as being extremely harmful to the development and well-being of the child and may have serious long-term negative consequences. Some features of neglect include children being left alone without adequate care and supervision, malnourishment, lacking food, unsuitable food or erratic feeding, a non-organic failure to thrive, such as a child not gaining weight due not only to malnutrition but also to emotional deprivation, a failure to provide adequate care for the child's medical and developmental needs, including intellectual stimulation, inadequate living conditions, unhygienic conditions, environmental issues including lack of adequate heat and furniture, a lack of adequate clothing or inattention to basic hygiene, a lack of protection and exposure to danger, including moral danger, or a lack of supervision appropriate to the child's age, persistent failure to attend school, and abandonment or desertion. If a child discloses any of the above situations, or if you are concerned that the child is experiencing any of the indicators of neglect, you should speak to your DLP and follow your organisation's child protection reporting procedure. Emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is the systematic emotional or psychological ill treatment of a child as part of the overall relationship between a caregiver and a child. Once-off and occasional difficulties between a parent or carer and child are not considered emotional abuse. Abuse occurs when a child's basic need for attention, affection, approval, consistency and security are not met due to incapacity or indifference from their parent or caregiver. Emotional abuse can also occur when adults responsible for taking care of children are unaware of and unable to meet their children's emotional and developmental needs. Emotional abuse is not easy to recognise because the effects are not always easily seen. A reasonable concern for the child's welfare would exist when the behaviour becomes typical of the relationship between the child and the parent or carer. There may be no physical signs of emotional abuse unless it occurs with another type of abuse. A child may show signs of emotional abuse through their actions or emotions in several ways. These include insecure attachment, unhappiness, low self-esteem, education and developmental underachievement, risk-taking and aggressive behaviour. It should be noted that no one indicator is conclusive evidence of emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is more likely to impact negatively on a child where it is persistent over time and where there is a lack of other protective factors. This list outlines some features of emotional abuse, including rejection, a lack of comfort and love, a lack of attachment, a lack of proper stimulation such as fun and play, a lack of continuity of care such as frequent moves, particularly if they are unplanned, a continuous lack of praise and encouragement, persistent criticism, sarcasm, hostility or blaming of the child, bullying, conditional parenting in which care or affection of a child depends on his or her behaviours or actions, extreme overprotectiveness, inappropriate non-physical punishment such as locking a child in a bedroom, ongoing family conflicts and family violence, or serious inappropriate expectations of a child relative to his or her age and stage of development. If a child discloses any of the above situations, or if you are concerned that a child is experiencing any of the indicators of emotional abuse, you should speak to your DLP. Physical abuse. Physical abuse is when someone deliberately hurts a child physically or puts them at risk of being physically hurt. It may occur as a single incident or as a pattern of incidents. A reasonable concern exists where the child's health and or development is, may be, or has been damaged as a result of suspected physical abuse. The Children First Act 2015 includes a provision that abolishes the common law defence of reasonable chastisement in court proceedings. This defence could previously be invoked by a parent or other person in authority who physically disciplined a child. The change in the legislation now means that in prosecutions relating to assault or physical cruelty, a person who administers such punishment to a child cannot rely on the defence of reasonable chastisement in the legal proceedings. The result of this is that the protections in law relating to assault now apply to a child in the same way as they do to an adult. Some features of physical abuse include physical punishment, beating, slapping, hitting or kicking, pushing, shaking or throwing, pinching, biting, choking or hair pulling, use of excessive force and handling, deliberate poisoning, suffocation, fabricated or induced illness, and female genital mutilation. If a child discloses any of the above situations, or if you are concerned that a child is experiencing any of the indicators of physical abuse, you should speak to your DLP. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse occurs when a child is used by another person for his or her gratification or arousal or for that of others. It includes the child being involved in sexual acts such as masturbation, fondling, oral or penetrative sex, or exposing the child to sexual activity directly or through pornography. Child sexual abuse may cover a wide spectrum of abusive activities. It rarely involves just a single incident, and in some instances occurs over a number of years. Child sexual abuse most commonly happens within the family, including older siblings and extended family members. An Garda Síochána will deal with any criminal aspects of a sexual abuse case under the relevant criminal justice legislation. The prosecution of a sexual offence against a child will be considered within the wider objective of child welfare and protection. The safety of the child is paramount, and at no stage should a child's safety be compromised because of a concern for the integrity of a criminal investigation. It should be remembered that sexual activity involving a young person may be sexual abuse even if the young person concerned does not themselves recognise it as abusive. Some features of sexual abuse include any sexual act intentionally performed in the presence of a child, an invitation to sexual touching or intentional touching or molesting of a child's body, whether by a person or object for the purpose of sexual arousal or gratification, masturbation in the presence of a child or the involvement of a child in an act of masturbation, sexual intercourse with a child, whether oral, vaginal or anal, exposing a child to inappropriate or abusive material through information and communication technology, or consensual sexual activity involving an adult and an underage person. Sexual exploitation of a child can also include inviting, inducing or coercing a child to engage in prostitution or the production of child pornography, for example exhibition, modelling or posing for the purpose of sexual arousal, gratification or sexual act, including its recording on film, videotape or other media, or the manipulation for those purposes of an image by computer or other means. Inviting, coercing or inducing a child to participate in or observe any sexual, indecent or obscene act, and showing sexually explicit material to children, which is often a feature of the grooming process by perpetrators of abuse. If a child discloses any of the above situations, or if you are concerned that a child is experiencing any of the indicators of sexual abuse, you should speak to your DLP. Safeguarding children. If you are dealing with children, you need to be alert to the possibility that a welfare or protection concern may arise in relation to children you come in contact with. A child needs to have someone they can trust in order to feel able to disclose abuse they may be experiencing. They need to know that they will be believed and will get the help they need. Without these things, they may be vulnerable to continuing abuse. There are many circumstances which may make children more vulnerable to harm. These include parent or carer factors, such as alcohol or drug misuse, addiction, mental health issues, or domestic violence. Child factors can include age, gender, disability, or mental health issues. Community factors can include culture-specific practices such as female genital mutilation, forced marriage, honour-based violence, or radicalisation. Environmental factors such as housing, poverty, begging, bullying, or internet and social media related concerns. And finally, poor motivation or willingness of parents and guardians to engage, such as non-attendance at appointments, a lack of insight or understanding to how a child is being affected, or avoidance of contact and reluctance to work with services. More information on this topic can be found in Chapter 2 of Always Children First National Guidance 2017. Domestic abuse. Domestic abuse occurs across society regardless of age, gender, race, sexuality, wealth and geography. TUSLA defines domestic violence as the use of physical or emotional force or the threat of physical force, including sexual violence, in close adult relationships. It can also involve emotional abuse, the destruction of property, isolation from friends, family and other potential sources of support, threats to others including children, stalking and control over access to money, personal items, food, transportation and the telephone. There are many key messages from research. The kinds of abusive tactics used directly against children living in domestic violence situations disclosed during contacts with the direct services in 2016 include the abuser smacking and hitting children, including with household items, the abuser physically and sexually abusing children, the abuser constantly shouting in children's faces, and children witnessing verbal, physical and sexual abuse against their mother. Prolonged and/or regular exposure to domestic abuse can have a serious impact on a child's development and emotional well-being, despite the efforts of the victim parent to protect the child. Women experiencing violence may also respond to the trauma of violence in ways that damage their own health. These responses can include substance use, depression, anxiety, and social withdrawal, and all can affect women's physical and mental well-being. This may impact on their ability to care safely for any children they may have. The link between child physical abuse cases and domestic abuse is high, with estimates ranging between 30 and 66%, depending on the country in question. Risks to children who live with domestic abuse include direct physical or sexual abuse of the child or children, the child being abused as part of the abuse against the non-abusing parent, emotional abuse to the child from witnessing the abuse, physical injury to the child by being present when the violence occurs, hearing abusive verbal exchanges between adults in the household, including humiliation and threatened violence, observing the abusive partner being removed and taken into guarded custody, witnessing their parent or carer being taken to hospital by ambulance, attempting to intervene in a violent assault, being unable or unwilling to invite friends to the house, and frequent disruptions to social life and schooling because of moving house to flee violence or living in a refuge. These are just some of the risks to children who live with domestic abuse. There is further information on this topic available in the TUSLA Child Protection and Welfare Practice Handbook 2. The link is below. The impact of abuse on children can have far-reaching consequences. Children experience confusion. Keeping secrets can cut off the normal routes for children to find answers. Abuse can confuse children and they can become unsure of how to act with other people. Fear. Children may have fear of physical pain, of where or how it will happen next, and a fear of punishment for themselves and or for their abuser. Guilt and shame. In order to live with recurrent abuse, some victims may believe they are to blame. They may feel guilty for being involved, thinking it must be something about me, etc., or because they find that the abusive behaviour is pleasurable or accept rewards given. If the family breaks up as a result of abuse, the victim can feel responsible for the family breakup, and they can also feel shame when an abuser denies that the abuse happened, and can feel guilty about the way other members of their family feel or behave. Anger. The victim of abuse may feel anger towards the abuser and towards significant others that they may feel failed to protect them, such as a parent or siblings. Some victims will repress their anger because they feel powerless, and this can lead to depression and withdrawal. Anger can also lead to aggressive attacks on themselves or on others. Feeling different. The victim of abuse may feel different and could isolate themselves, usually out of choice. They may feel dirty, worthless, or contaminated. Feelings of difference could also mean that they are concerned that they will mature differently to others and become like the abuser. Worthlessness and loss of self-esteem. Some victims of abuse feel like damaged goods, or that they don't deserve anything good from anybody. Sometimes their self-talk includes things like, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm unattractive, and this is why it happens. Sadness, depression, and loss. In interfamilial abuse, children can feel loss of love or people that are important. Other feelings can be a sense of loss of companionship or friends through isolation and a feeling that they have lost their childhood. Powerlessness. The child victim of abuse can take on victim identity. They may see the world and people in it as unsafe and may also lack trust in their own judgment. Some survivors of child abuse can see themselves as defined by their abuse. Some other possible impacts of abuse on children include self-harm. Some children have been abused find they have an inability to manage relationships. Other behaviours that can be exhibited by children who have been abused include substance abuse, engaging in risky behaviour, isolation, loneliness and depression, a lack of trust in others, physical and mental health issues, engaging in criminality, and poor educational achievement. This slide outlines why children don't tell about the abuse they may be experiencing. They may have a fear of their abuser, and they may have a fear of the consequences of telling. They may feel that their abuse is a taboo subject, or they may be in the situation where the abuse has been normalised. There may be threats and bribery involved from the abuser, and the child may feel embarrassment and guilt for being a victim of abuse. They may also have a fear of rejection or not being believed, or they may not have the language or the intellectual ability to tell what's happening. They may also have a fear of family breakup. On the contrary, these are some reasons why children do tell about the abuse they are experiencing. They may feel that they have to protect younger siblings, or a trusted adult may appear that they feel they can disclose this information to. They may be receiving information such as sex education at school or media that lets them know that what's happening to them isn't okay. Increasing age and maturity can also give children the confidence to disclose what's happening to them. They may feel anger towards their abuser, or they may have a pregnancy or a fear of becoming pregnant. They may also have a fear of harm or death. As previously mentioned, children who are experiencing abuse or neglect will often seek out a trusted adult to tell them what is happening in their lives. This is why it's crucially important that all early learning and care practitioners work with a child-centred approach in order to allow strong, secure relationships between children and practitioners develop. If a child makes a disclosure to you, this is guidance as to how you should and shouldn't respond. Do stay calm, listen to the child and accept what the child says. Reassure the child and maintain confidentiality. Remain supportive to the child and record in writing the child's words after the disclosure and not during the conversation. Don't panic, pressurise the child, or promise to keep secrets. Don't ask leading questions or details or make suggestions, and don't make the child repeat the disclosure. Don't start to investigate, but certainly don't delay or do nothing. Points to remember if you have any child protection or welfare concerns. Always follow your organisation's reporting procedure. Your DLP is a valuable resource. You should ensure that your policies and procedures outline this step. Ensure records are taken and that all confidentiality procedures are followed in line with your organisation's record-keeping policy. Assessment and/or investigation of abuse must be left to TUSLA duty social workers and the Gardaí. Always remember, the important factor in deciding whether the behaviour is abuse or neglect is the impact of that behaviour on the child rather than the intention of the parent or carer. Section 2. Responding to and reporting concerns. Reasonable grounds for concern. This is the threshold at which all people will report a child protection or welfare concern under the Children First National Guidance. A reasonable concern exists where the child's health and/or development is, may be, or has been damaged. All concerns about possible sexual abuse would constitute a reasonable concern. The Children First National Guidance lists 6 examples of reasonable grounds for concern. These are evidence. For example, an injury or behaviour that is consistent with abuse and is unlikely to have been caused in any other way. Any concern about possible sexual abuse. Consistent signs that a child is suffering from emotional or physical neglect. A child saying or indicating by other means that he or she has been abused. An admission or indication by an adult or a child of an alleged abuse they committed. And an account from a person who saw a child being abused. This is the baseline for all people at which reports about the safety or welfare of a child should be made to TUSLA. Threshold of harm under the Children First Act 2015. This is the threshold at which a mandated person should make a mandated report under the Children First Act 2015. The difference between the threshold in the Children First Act is the inclusion of the term seriously affect, compared to the term affect used in reasonable grounds for concern under the Children First National Guidance. The basic threshold for making a report is a reasonable concern under the Children First National Guidance. The threshold of harm described in the Act is an additional threshold for mandated persons to make mandated reports. The threshold of harm under the Children First Act 2015 is reached when you know, believe, or have reasonable grounds to suspect that a child has been, is being, or is at risk of being ill-treated, neglected, or assaulted to the point where the child's health, development, or welfare have been, are being seriously affected, or are likely to be seriously affected, or where a child discloses such a belief. All sexual abuse falls within the category of seriously affecting a child's health, welfare, or development. If as a mandated person you receive a disclosure of harm from a child which is above the threshold set out above, you must make a mandated report of the concern to TUSLA. You are not required to judge the truth of the claims or the credibility of the child. Informal consultation. If you are concerned about a child but unsure whether you should report it to TUSLA, you may find it useful to contact TUSLA to informally discuss your concern. This provides an opportunity to discuss the query in general and to decide whether a formal report of the concern to TUSLA is appropriate at this stage. If the concern is below the threshold for reporting, TUSLA may be able to provide advice in terms of continuing to observe and monitor the child and other services that may be more suitable to meeting the needs of the child and/or the family. Informal consultation with the TUSLA duty social worker provides an opportunity to discuss the query in general and to decide whether or not a formal report is warranted. Where the advice from TUSLA is that a report is warranted, your organisation's safeguarding policy must direct that reports should be made and all relevant information provided. When seeking advice, the consulting party needs to state explicitly that they are not making a report, that they are giving details of a concern but no identifying information in relation to a child or family. Making a report, guiding principles. Reports can be made to TUSLA in person, over the phone or in writing. For professionals making reports, the Child Protection and Welfare Report Form or Retrospective Abuse Report Form can either be posted, delivered in person or completed and submitted electronically through the TUSLA web portal. The TUSLA web portal is TUSLA's preferred method for receiving child protection or welfare concerns. There are dedicated contact points. TUSLA now operates 17 dedicated points of contact for making child protection or welfare reports or discussing concerns with a social worker. You must always follow your organisation's child protection and welfare reporting procedures. Informal consultation. If you are concerned about a child but unsure whether you should report to TUSLA, you may find it useful to contact TUSLA to informally discuss your concerns. It is not necessary for you to prove that abuse has occurred to report a concern to TUSLA. All that is required is that you have reasonable grounds for concern. Joint reporting. Mandated reports can be submitted jointly by mandated persons and any other person. In early learning and care services, it is recommended that mandated persons make a joint report with their DLP. Mandated persons can make non-mandated reports. Remember, mandated persons can also make reports under the Children First National Guidance when they believe that there are reasonable grounds for concern that have not met or exceeded the threshold for mandated reports. If you think a child is in immediate danger and you cannot contact TUSLA, you should contact the Gardaí. There is an emergency out-of-hours service available. This service is operated by TUSLA. Always consider implications of the Criminal Justice Withholding of Information on Offences Against Children and Vulnerable Persons Act 2012. TUSLA now require anyone making a child protection and welfare report to use the secure web portal on the TUSLA website, unless this is not possible. Early learning and care services should already be familiar with this portal, as it is the same portal that is used to complete early years registrations. The portal can be accessed on the TUSLA website, and there is also a short user guide available.
Section 3. The following slides contain links to resources and documents that will be useful for early learning and care services to reference. Supports are available with Understanding the Children First Act 2015 and associated roles and responsibilities for all early learning and care practitioners and early learning and care staff members who work with children and their families. Staff and management, and particularly those with responsibilities in services such as relevant persons and those in the role of designated liaison person or deputy designated liaison person, should familiarise themselves with these publications. It is also crucially important that each early learning and care service has a child protection policy which clearly outlines the procedures that must be followed in cases where there are child protection and welfare concerns. Services, as relevant services under the Children First Act 2015, are also required to have and display a child safeguarding statement.